Build the family of your dreams with Pinnacle Fertility Ohio. Our expert physician team has over 30 years of experience offering personalized fertility treatment plans tailored just for you. Get started today. Your future family awaits. Book now at rgiohio.com.
I am Molly. I am 43 years old. I have twins, boy-girl twins, Mila and Ryder, 7 years old. They were conceived through IVF. Our infertility journey started really right after we got married. So we got married a little bit later. I was 31, my husband was 30, and we wanted to start trying right away. I was diagnosed at 18 with a polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, and it kind of just went to the back of my mind. I was put on birth control. Through my 20s, I was always on birth control. And not until I went off, shortly after getting married, did we find out I just didn't ovulate. So we knew we were going to need help pretty early on. So we started our journey right away. So I was put on Clomid. We did that for, 8 cycles, way too long. Wasn't really doing anything for me. So we needed to really see a specialist at that time, which brought a lot of uncertainty and emotions, but we were ready to jump in. Whatever it was going to take, we were going to do. So I was referred to a fertility clinic here in Columbus. And right away, we just kind of started doing some tests, seeing my ovarian reserve, kind of what would be our next protocol, and we jumped in. So we did 4 rounds of shots and IUIs. None were successful. So after 4 rounds, we, got to that hard decision of it was probably time for IVF. So we jumped right into IVF. And, I would say it was pretty successful for me. Being a polycystic patient, my first retrieval, I had 34 eggs, which is a lot. That's, in the IVF world, that's a good, strong number. So we were overjoyed with that. And then that's really kind of when our journey started to take a turn, was after that first egg retrieval. We had some unexpected events that really kind of took myself and, our doctors for a little bit of a loop. I started to react, a little bit different on medications than what they were typically used to. So we kind of went to a plan B. After having such a large egg retrieval of 34 eggs, I had something called OHSS, where I had a ton of fluid built up in my abdomen and my ovaries, and it just wasn't safe for me to transfer those embryos. So that was kind of like our first blow that we were unexpecting. But again, we just kind of buried down and, we were going through the journey together. So we thought we were going to transfer, some embryos right after that retrieval. Well, we weren't. My body needed some time to recover. So we went for a frozen embryo transfer. And that's kind of where our journey took probably the most devastating turn. So the morning of our frozen embryo transfer, I got a phone call. And I knew, I'm like, this isn't good that I'm getting a call the morning of transfer. And it was the embryologist from the lab. And they said, Molly, we're getting ready for your transfer. And we're seeing some concerns with the thawing of your embryos. They're really we're not sure really what's going on, but your embryos aren't surviving the thawing process. Probably the biggest blow and just immediate shock I've ever felt hearing those words, nobody prepared us for that phone call. Nobody had mentioned this could happen during the thawing procedure. So we were totally caught off guard. And I was told, we'll call you in an hour. We'll see where this goes. At that time, I had 13 frozen embryos, which was an amazing amount. A lot of people don't start with that many. So we were very grateful for that number, and we were confident with that number. Like, this should probably lead us to a pregnancy. But they called me back in an hour and they said, Molly, we're really shocked. We don't, again, really know what's going on. We don't see this that often. But none of your embryos are surviving the thawing process. So it was just like, what does this mean? Is our journey over right now, right here and then? Like, I just remember looking up at my husband and we just looked at each other like, well, we didn't expect this. So they said, come on in. When you get here, we'll have an update for you. And I just remember, driving there with my husband, we were completely silent. I was just looking out the car window, just looking up to God and just saying, like, this is it. We went through all of this and it's been yanked away. But we got there and the embryologist met with us, and there wasn't a lot of conversation that day because I think they didn't really know what was going on. They didn't want to say too much. But they just said, you know what, Molly, we'll move forward with the transfer. We aren't really sure if these embryos are even viable anymore, but you're here, so let's just do it. So we did it, and I knew in my heart that day that it was over. Like, I knew those embryos, for whatever reason, were no longer with us. Yeah, they couldn't give me any reasons. They just basically were like, start over. We didn't have the means to start over. Like, we had spent all our money. This was it. So it was devastating. It really was the biggest blow. And just to not have an answer of what happened. You don't hear the lab fucking up that much, like, but we knew something went down. And to this day, I know something went down. I didn't need them to tell me something went wrong, but something went wrong. So we took some time off. We really needed to recoup. I knew I wasn't going to give up, but I felt really defeated. And again, financially, emotionally, physically, it's like, where do we go from here? Like, we just did everything we were supposed to do. I had 13 embryos. I had 34 eggs. Like, I had every shot to get pregnant. So we took a break. I let myself heal a little bit. And then I picked right back up and I said, it's time to get a second opinion. We got to go somewhere else. So that's what we did. And thank God we did. So we met a new doctor, and, I went in with a big binder of my paperwork. I was so prepared, and I laid it all out for him, and I had notes, and, he's looking through it, with it. And his eyes are this big, and he was like, Molly, I feel like you were like really mistreated. He was like, this is wild to me. He was like, why did they do this? Why were you on so much medication? I can't believe you got OHSS. Like, none of this is what I would have done. And then when we got to the embryos part, it was validation. He was like, Molly, that doesn't just happen in the lab. Like, you have to have state-of-the-art technology and be doing things to a T. And the fact that this happened to you, something was not followed. Something happened in error. And he was like, but, looking at your numbers and, looking at your blood work. And he was like, if you're willing to give it another shot, he was like, I think you got a fair chance. And he was like, our lab here, stuff like that doesn't happen. And he was like, this is unheard of. And he's like, just, have a little faith in me. And if you guys can muster up, the strength to do this again, he's like, let's do it together. So we did, and it was a completely different experience. We decided to move forward with this new clinic, this new doctor. It was a renewed sense of hope that, yeah, we just were defeated, but like we've got this new chance now with this new doctor. And he had a different plan and protocol for us. It felt good. So we moved forward, and the medications I was taking, the protocol, everything was different. And that's, it felt good because I felt like this was being tailored to me. I wasn't just a number, going through, everyone does the same steps. I felt like this doctor really was like, Molly, for your blood work and what you did the previous round, this is what we're going to do different this round. So it felt really good. We decided obviously to go straight to IVF. There was no sense of kind of doing anything prior to that. We just jumped in full force. So we had an egg retrieval, and again, I took off some time to, heal, recruit. My body had been through a lot, so we did another frozen transfer. We didn't do a fresh transfer. And everything about that day, we were nervous, right? Because what we had been through before with the lab, this part of the process is when things went really south for us. So we went in that day, and the embryologist and this doctor sat us down and literally, just looked in our eyes and said, Molly, your embryos are thawing beautifully. We see no concern. Everything that's supposed to happen is happening. They showed us a picture of our 2 embryos that we were going to transfer, which I thought was so cool. I just loved seeing a little picture, of those cells. So we went in and we transferred 2 embryos. And we left that day, and I looked at my husband and I said, something's different about today. I really, something's different. I feel good. I feel at ease, and 10 days later, early, when I wasn't supposed to test at home, I did. And it's the first positive we've ever gotten. And, I'll remember that moment and second and place in time forever. So first transfer with this new doctor, and it took. My biggest piece of advice, someone going through this journey, is you've got to be your own biggest advocate. You know in your gut when something's wrong or something feels off. No one's going to push you and, be rooting for you as much as yourself. So you do owe it to yourself to, in something this big, continue to push for yourself. There's so much information and education luckily available now on, IVF. It's okay to do your own research and ask the questions and, advocate for yourself. Another thing, that I think is the biggest piece of advice and, what I learned from our journey is, this was 9 years ago for me. So the social platform, isn't quite as, large as it is now. But I do remember on Instagram, I was laying in bed one night, and I just happened to put in hashtag IVF. And it was like a light bulb went off. It was alarming to me how much information in a community of women and people struggling with infertility have come together on social media. So I just remember that night, like it was like women all across the country and the world in that moment were going through exactly what I was going through. And it was like a holy shit moment. Like I was so like to find this resource that I did feel alone. None of my girlfriends, none of my sisters, no one really had been down this path with struggling with infertility. So I did feel alone for, a lot of it until I found this fierce army of women. They were strangers, and we were connecting on a very deep level. And these strangers were now like my little cheerleaders on the side that were supporting me And the bond was like instant. I mean, we were checking on each other daily. How'd your appointment go? How are your follicles? When's your transfer? I mean, it was like this sisterhood of women that really was like this tribe that will live with me forever, because it honestly helped me through this process more than anything else. So just know you're not alone. You're not alone there. And I think we're getting better at talking about infertility, this podcast, and, a lot of people are getting more comfortable talking about it, but a lot of people still aren't. And I just, it was such a traumatic experience for me. I vowed to myself, really for the rest of my life, if I can be an infertility advocate for anyone, whether it's one person, I want to be that person to help, because it really has changed my life forever. I'm 9 years outside of it now, but it's never going to leave me. It is such a big piece in my heart that I'll support anyone, anytime, and anything that I can do to just kind of spread a little bit of knowledge or share my journey to inspire others. I'm here for it. When you're looking at, your inner group of people, right? Your friends, your spouse, your family, your coworkers, when you're going through this journey, I do recommend not having to keep to yourself. Talk about it. Let people know what you're going through, because it's affecting your whole life. It's affecting your job. It's affecting your relationship with your girlfriends. So the biggest thing, that you're going to hear the most is just relax. Just maybe when you stop trying, it will finally happen. Take a break. Those things that people, they think they're being supportive. They think those are helpful things. It hurts. It stings. It's almost laughable. But I do give people, you got to give these people grace, because they don't know what you're going through, and they think these things that they're saying are helpful, even though they're not. So my biggest piece of advice is, you can show your vulnerable side of what you're going through. I remember it was really hard for me, because I was in that stage of life where all my friends were getting married and having babies. If not on their first baby, their second baby. So everyone's going through the motions and they're moving throughout life, and I'm standing still. My life isn't moving forward. So I was kind of in this bitter place of, for my best friends, if you invited me to your baby shower, I was mad at you. How dare you? But then if you didn't invite me to your baby shower because you were trying to protect me, I was even more pissed. So it was like this very challenging point that you're navigating with your friends. So it's okay to let them know how you're feeling. They're not going to probably get it, but they should know how you're feeling. And some of your friends are going to be better about it than others. But you'll know the ones that you can go to. I found a quote that, it really stuck with me. And it was one of those, I really am happy for you, but I'm truly sad for myself too. And I had to say that to myself a lot. I am happy that my best friend just got pregnant, but I'm really sad for me still too. And, if you're comfortable, telling yourself that over and over again, I do think it's going to help you out. So our infertility journey impacted my relationship, my marriage with my spouse significantly. I'll say first and foremost, it created this fierce, fiery bond. We were in it together. We were going to fight together. And that felt good. It was kind of this new bond, and a newly marriage. But that aside, um, I've had several conversations with my husband that it affected him tremendously because he felt helpless. So, watching his wife take the burden of this journey, especially physically, and he didn't, being the male, he obviously did not have to go through the physical ailments that I did. That didn't sit with him well. So also he was my shot giver, and I think that took a toll on him, just having to do those daily shots multiple times a day, it was hard. And that was a new territory and feeling for him that he wasn't used to. I can say too, and we're comfortable talking about it now, but he was my safe space during the day. He was my pincushion. He was supportive and gave me grace. But what I didn't know at the time is, when I would go to bed at night, he was turning to bourbon. So that was his escape. And I didn't know it, but that's what he needed. And he was doing it by himself. And I feel like that's probably a whole nother episode going down that path, but
Same thing.
yeah, so
Different drink, but same.
yeah, I mean, everybody handles trauma and hard life events differently. And, we got through that, but he needed his space. And that was kind of his outlet at night. And I didn't know. But yeah, I mean, infertility definitely affected our marriage in different ways. But at the end of the day, we were fighting this together. And we actually, I thought this was, my husband is a tattoo enthusiast. He's a tattoo collector. I mean, he's 90% covered. And I had no tattoos. And one day when we were having a rough time, he said, let's go get some type of infertility journey bond tattoo together. Let's do it. And I was like, let's do it. So, he called up his tattoo artist on a whim, and he was like, I want to do that. Come in right now. So we got, it literally says our journey. We both got the same tattoo, and it has this beautiful blue bird. And that was my first tattoo. And I love that day. Like it means a lot to me. And we look at our tattoos and we're like, we did that together. So I do think that that's a little special part of our journey. I do like to share. So since he doesn't have much room, so that was a challenge. So his is actually at the lower base of his neck. Mine's on my ribs.
Spin it. Spin it. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna throw up.